At my daughter's birthday party, I arrived with my wife, hoping for one peaceful evening with her and her wealthy in-laws. But before dinner was even over, my son-in-law leaned back, smirked, and said, "Trash belongs outside. Someone like you doesn't belong at this table." Everyone laughed. My daughter only lowered her eyes and said nothing. I took my wife's hand and walked out quietly. That night, a single text message changed my daughter's entire life. "Thank you so much for being here. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment with your country and city. I enjoy reading everyone. Also, this story includes fictional elements for storytelling and reflection. Any similarity to names or places is coincidental, but I hope its message stays with you." It was the second Saturday of July, and the Carolina heat had not let up even after sundown. Martha and I pulled up to the Whitmore estate just after 7 in the evening. The kind of summer night where the air sits thick and warm against your skin, no matter how long you've been standing in it. String lights hung between the oak trees lining the driveway, and from somewhere beyond the iron gate came the sound of a live jazz trio and the soft murmur of a crowd already well into their evening. Martha adjusted the collar of my sport coat before I could reach for the door handle. She had worn the blue dress, the one she saves for occasions when she needs to feel steady. I had on the charcoal jacket Claire gave me 2 birthdays ago. I remember thinking I looked respectable enough. I remember thinking that would matter. It didn't. Gerald Whitmore was stationed near the outdoor bar when we came through the entrance, a glass of bourbon in one hand, and the easy confidence of a man who has never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. He looked at us the way you look at a piece of furniture that someone moved to the wrong room briefly, without particular interest, and then away. "Richard." Just my name. No handshake, no come in. "Glad you're here." Just my name dropped like a stone into shallow water. And then his back was to us again. Pamela Whitmore, his wife, caught my eye from across the rose bushes. She offered a smile so thin and brief it barely registered as one, then turned back to the circle of women around her without missing a beat of their conversation. Martha's hand found mine. Her grip was light but deliberate. "We're here for Claire," she said quietly, close enough to my ear that no one else could hear. She was right. We were here for Claire. We found seats at one of the smaller tables near the edge of the patio, off to the side, away from the cluster of guests gathered around the main spread. Nobody had directed us there. Nobody had directed us anywhere. I pulled out Martha's chair and then settled into my own and looked out across that backyard. The infinity pool glowing pale blue at the far end. The outdoor kitchen with its marble countertops and built-in grill. The white linen draped over every surface. And I thought quietly, and without saying it aloud, I've seen checks go toward this. I just never knew exactly which ones. Across the garden, Claire stood near the outdoor fireplace with Derek and a circle of his friends, all of them dressed in the particular way that announces money without ever having to mention it. She saw us. I know because our eyes met for just a second, and she smiled. One of those tight-managed smiles that carries 2 messages at once. "I see you, and please stay there." So we stayed there. The evening moved the way those evenings always do. Toasts to people I didn't know. Laughter at references I wasn't part of, servers refilling glasses I hadn't touched. Martha and I talked quietly between ourselves. The way you talk when you're trying to make a corner feel less like a corner. Then Gerald tapped his glass. He rose from his chair at the head of the main table with the unhurried ease of a man who expects rooms to go quiet when he stands. "They did before dessert," he said, projecting his voice across the whole patio without effort. "I want to say a few words about our Claire." He smiled at her warmly, genuinely even, and swept his arm wide to include the people around him. "She has grown into a remarkable woman, and this family is proud to call her one of our own." Applause. The clink of crystal. Claire's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. I stood up. I don't know exactly what made me do it. Maybe the same stubborn instinct that makes a man show up to a party where he already knows he's not wanted. Because some things you do not because they're comfortable, but because they're right. I reached for my water glass and cleared my throat. "I'd like to say something as well," I said. The nearest table went quiet first. The quiet spread outward from there. I looked at Claire. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not warmth, not pride. Something more like a breath held at the back of the throat. I opened my mouth to begin. Derek Whitmore turned in his chair and looked at me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The patio had gone still enough that 30 people heard every word with perfect clarity. "Trash belongs outside," he said. "Someone like you doesn't belong at this table." The words hit me somewhere below the ribs. My brain tried to reroute them to find some other interpretation, some version of those words that meant something different than what they plainly meant. There wasn't one. And the smiles, the small, reflexive, privately satisfied smiles that moved around that table in the 2 seconds that followed, those confirmed it. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't temper. This was choreography. I looked at Claire. She was looking at her hands, both of them flat against the tablecloth in front of her. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were down. And she did not say a single word. Something in my chest reached its limit in that moment. Not with a crash. Not with heat. Just a quiet, definitive snap. The sound a thing makes when it has been bent too far for too long. Martha's fingers closed around my forearm beneath the table. Firm, steady. The grip of a woman who has spent 4 decades knowing exactly when to hold on. I set my water glass down on the table without a sound. I did not look at Derek again. I did not look at Gerald. I looked at my wife, and she was already rising. We walked across that patio together, past the servers in white gloves, past the string lights, past the jazz trio that was still playing, as if nothing at all had happened. And I stopped at the table near the entrance and set down the gift box I had been carrying, the one with the watch inside, the one I had wrapped myself that morning at our kitchen table with brown paper and a piece of twine, because that is how my father taught me to wrap a gift. The iron gate clicked shut behind us. Martha didn't speak. I didn't speak. We walked to the car in the thick July dark, and I opened her door, and she got in. And I walked around to my side and sat down and put both hands on the steering wheel and looked at the street ahead of us. My chest felt hollow in a way I hadn't felt since the day we buried my father. Not grief exactly. Something older than grief. Something that lives underneath it. "Richard," Martha said very softly. "I know," I said, and I started the car. We were 20 minutes out of South Park when Martha finally spoke. "Pull over," she said. I glanced at her. "We're almost home, Richard." Her voice had that particular weight to it. Not loud, not sharp, just heavy in the way that means she has been holding something back and has decided she is done holding it. "Pull over." I eased the car off onto a side street and cut the engine. The neighborhood was quiet around us, just porch lights and the distant sound of someone's television bleeding through a screen door. Martha turned in her seat to face me. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm fine." "You are not fine." She reached over and put her hand flat against my chest, right over my sternum, the way she has done since we were young. And she wanted to know what my heart was actually doing. "Talk to me." I covered her hand with mine. "What do you want me to say, Martha?" "Anything. Say anything. Just stop sitting there like you've turned to stone." I let out a breath that had been sitting in my chest since the moment Derek opened his mouth. "He planned it," I said. "That wasn't temper. That wasn't a bad moment. He planned that." Martha's jaw tightened. "I know." And I stopped, started again. She sat right there. She didn't even look up. "I know, Richard. She's our daughter. I know." Martha's voice cracked on that one just slightly, the way a very strong thing cracks when the pressure finally finds the right place. She pressed her hand harder against my chest. "I know she is." We sat like that for a while, her hand over my heart, the engine ticking as it cooled. Outside, a sprinkler came on somewhere down the block, a slow mechanical arc back and forth across someone's front lawn. "Let's go home," I finally said. She nodded and turned back to face forward. I started the car. By the time we pulled into our driveway, we were both steadier, not better steadier. There's a difference. And at 68 years old, I have learned to be grateful for the smaller version of things. Martha went straight to the kitchen the moment we were inside. I sat down on the sofa, still in my good sport coat, and listened to the kettle fill in the quiet of the house, doing what it always does. She came back with 2 mugs and sat close beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her arm against mine. "Tea helps nothing," she said, handing me one anyway. No, I agreed. It doesn't. She almost smiled at that almost. We sat together, mugs in hand, and the evening sat with us. Then my phone buzzed against the cushion. I looked down at the screen. Claire's name. I picked it up. One line, 8 words. Dad, don't forget the monthly transfer. I held the phone so Martha could see. She leaned in, read it, and set her mug down on the coffee table with a careful, deliberate movement that told me everything about what she was feeling. She didn't. Martha stopped. No, I said. She didn't. Not one word. Martha pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling for a moment. When she looked back at me, her eyes were glistening, but her voice was steady. What are you going to do? I looked at the message again. 8 words, no apology, no are you okay? No acknowledgement that anything had happened at all. Just the same line she sent on the 12th of every month, as reliable and impersonal as a bill coming due. I'm going to tell her the truth, I said. I started typing. Martha watched my hands. I typed slowly the way you do when each word is a decision you're making in real time, and you don't want to get any of them wrong. Not anymore. From today, you're on your own. I showed it to Martha before I sent it. She read it. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet now fully, but she didn't wipe them. Send it, she said quietly. I pressed send. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The phone sat face down on the cushion. The mantel clock ticked. Martha reached over and took my hand in both of hers, threading her fingers through mine the way she used to do when we were young and sitting in the dark in another living room in another life. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about that. Actually thought about it like I just set something down that I've been carrying for a very long time, I said. She squeezed my hand. Good. Is it? Yes, Richard. She leaned her head against my shoulder. It is. The phone didn't buzz again that night. We sat together until the tea went cold, and then we turned off the lights and went to bed. Martha was asleep within minutes. I could tell by the way her breathing changed slow, and even her hand still loosely holding mine on top of the covers. But I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling in the dark, running through every version of the next few days I could imagine. Every call Claire might make, everything Derek might do, every way this could unfold now that I had finally, after 10 years, said the one word I should have said a long time ago. Not in anger, not with a door slammed or a voice raised, just a quiet, plainly worded no sent from a sofa in a house that was paid for with the same hands that had been writing checks for a decade. I didn't sleep until well past 2 in the morning, and when I finally did, I dreamed of nothing at all, which after a night like that one felt like exactly the right thing. By the time the first gray light started coming through the bedroom curtains, I had already been lying awake for over an hour, listening to Martha breathe beside me and turning the evening over in my mind. The way you turn a stone you found on the ground, examining each side, not sure yet what you're looking at, but certain it matters. At 5, I gave up on sleep entirely. I dressed quietly in the dark, pulled the bedroom door shut behind me, and walked down the hall to my study. The room smelled the way it always does, old paper, the faint trace of the pipe tobacco I gave up 15 years ago, but whose ghost apparently never left, and the particular dusty warmth of books that haven't been opened in a while. I turned on the desk lamp and stood in the middle of the room for a moment. Then I looked at the safe in the corner. It's a heavy thing. Dark gray steel bolted to the floor behind the bookshelf. I bought it the year Claire started college, mostly for the house deed and our wills and the kind of documents you never want to think about until you suddenly have to. Over the years, other things found their way in there. Bank statements I had printed and filed instead of deleting. Receipts I told myself I was keeping for tax purposes. I pulled the bookshelf aside and crouched down in front of the safe. My knees protested the way they always do these days, a dull complaint that I have learned to ignore. I turned the dial through the combination and pulled the door open. The stack of folders inside was thicker than I remembered. I carried everything to the desk and spread it out under the lamp. 12 folders, each one labeled by year in my own handwriting. Bank statements paper-clipped together, printed wire transfer confirmations, a handful of envelopes I recognized immediately, the ones Claire used to send when she still sent things by mail back when she was in college, and a handwritten note felt like something worth keeping. I opened the first folder. 2014, the year Claire started her senior year. The numbers were right there, plain as anything. A wire transfer in September, another in November, a third in January of the following year, bigger than the first two, combined with a note I had written to myself in the margin tuition shortfall. Do not mention to Martha. I set that one aside and opened the next folder. Then the next, then the next. By the time I had worked through all 12, the desk was covered, and the lamp felt like it wasn't throwing enough light for what I was looking at. I found a legal pad in the drawer and started writing down totals column by column the way I used to work out project estimates back when I was still taking contracts. Claire's college tuition, the portions her scholarship hadn't covered, and her loans hadn't reached $48,000. The deposit on her first apartment, the one she and Derek had taken in uptown Charlotte, the year after they married, when Derek's check bounced on a Friday, and she called me from a parking garage, crying so hard I could barely make out what she was saying. $35,000. Medical bills, car repairs, the emergency calls that came in at odd hours from numbers I didn't always recognize at first. $67,000. The loans, the ones Derek had asked for directly, always framed as temporary, always with some version of, "We'll pay you back as soon as the business stabilizes." $89,000. I set my pen down and looked at the legal pad. $239,000 spread across 10 years, moved quietly in pieces. The way you move something heavy when you don't want anyone to notice the effort. My hands were steady. I want to be clear about that. My hands were completely steady, but somewhere behind my sternum, something was pulling tight, like a rope under too much weight, and I had to press my palm flat against the desk for a moment, just to give that feeling somewhere to go. I picked up the last envelope in the stack, the one I hadn't opened yet, tucked behind the final folder. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. Claire's handwriting from years ago, the loopy cursive she used before everything went to text messages. "Dad, I don't know what I'd do without you. I mean that. Love, Claire." I folded it back up and set it on top of the legal pad. Then I opened the small blue notebook I kept in the top drawer, the one where I had been recording things in my own shorthand for years, not for any formal purpose, just because I'm the kind of man who writes things down. I turned to the last entry written 2 days ago before the party, July 10th. Claire called, said the party would mean a lot to her, said she wanted us there. I picked up the pen and wrote the date of the day before, July 12th, trash belongs outside. I looked at those 4 words for a long time. Then I closed the notebook, got up from the desk, and went to put the coffee on. Martha would be up soon, and I needed to figure out how much of this I was ready to say out loud. Martha appeared in the doorway in her robe hair, not yet brushed, and stopped when she saw my face. "You didn't sleep," she said. Not a question. A little Richard. She came to the counter and picked up her cup, wrapping both hands around it, the way she does when she wants something warm to hold on to. "How long have you been up?" "Since about 5:30. She studied me over the rim of her cup. I walked her through it. Every folder, every year. I explained the tuition payments, the ones I had covered, without telling her because the scholarship had come up short, and I hadn't wanted to worry her during a year that had already been hard on us financially. I showed her the wire transfer records from the apartment deposit, the ones with Derek's name on the receiving account alongside Claire's. I showed her the $89,000, the largest and most recent column, and explained that those had been Derek's requests, specifically always framed as short-term, always with a date attached for repayment that never arrived. With each folder I opened, Martha's expression changed. The brightness in her eyes stayed, but underneath it, something harder was settling in. Not anger yet, but the thing that comes just before anger, the full and final understanding of something you had suspected, but not yet confirmed. "He asked you directly," she said when I finished explaining the $89,000. "Derek called you himself every time. And Claire, sometimes she was on the call, sometimes she wasn't." Martha set her cup down and rubbed her face with both hands, a gesture I have only seen her make a handful of times in 40 years, always when she is trying to process. She is trying to process something that her usual composure doesn't have a ready category for. When she dropped her hands, her eyes were wet at the corners. "I heard things," she said, "over the years. Things I didn't tell you. I pulled the other chair close and sat down facing her. What things? She took a breath. At Christmas 2 years ago, I went out to the back porch to get the extra chair from the storage closet, and I could hear Derek and Gerald talking in the library through the window. Gerald said. She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. Gerald said, "How much longer do we keep the old man on the line?" And Derek said, "As long as Claire keeps him happy. He won't stop. He thinks she needs him." The words landed in my chest like something cold and heavy. "Martha," I said carefully, "how long have you known?" "I didn't know," she said, and her voice broke fully. This time, tears spilling over before she could stop them. I suspected. I heard things that didn't sit right, but I told myself I was reading too much into it. I told myself that if I brought it to you and I was wrong, I would have caused a fight with Claire for nothing. And if I was right, she wiped her face with the back of her hand. If I was right, I didn't want to be the one to break your heart. I reached across and took both her hands in mine. Her fingers were trembling. This woman who almost never cries, who holds everything together by force of sheer quiet, was sitting in my desk chair with tears running down her face and her hands shaking in mine. "You weren't wrong," I said. "I know that now." She squeezed my hands hard. "I'm sorry, Richard. I should have told you sooner. We both held things we shouldn't have." She nodded, wiping her face again, pulling herself back together the way she always does, not by stopping feeling it, but by deciding to feel it and keep moving at the same time. "Then I'm going to say it now," I said. "Everything I should have said years ago. And then we're going to call Daniel Crawford." The next day, I received a call from a stranger named Jake Morrison. He had been the videographer at the party. He told me he had forgotten to power down his camera when the formal part of the evening wrapped up. It kept recording everything that happened after I walked out. I set up my laptop on the coffee table, pressed play, and watched as Gerald raised his glass and said, "Now that's settled, let's actually enjoy the evening." The table erupted in laughter. Then Derek leaned in with his elbows on the table and said, "The old man's predictable. You cut him. He bleeds, but he always comes back." Gerald laughed and pointed his glass at Derek. "Exactly right. He'll wire the money next month, same as always. That's what he's good for." The table erupted again, and then the camera panned, and for 3 seconds, it settled on Claire. She was sitting with both hands wrapped around her wine glass, her eyes down, her shoulders pulled inward. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't smiling. She was just sitting there inside that laughter, surrounded by it. Martha and I sat in the living room long after the video ended. "I'm calling Daniel Crawford tomorrow morning," I said. "Every dollar, every transfer, and I'm going to show him every frame of that footage." Daniel Crawford's office was on the 12th floor of a building on South Tryon Street in downtown Charlotte. I sat in the leather chair across from him and slid the legal pad across his desk. He read it slowly, occasionally making a note. When he finished, he set his pen down and leaned back in his chair. "The transfers, were they documented as loans or gifts?" "Neither," I said. "They were just transfers." "Did you ever sign any documents on their behalf?" I almost said no. Then I remembered the weekday afternoon Claire had called, casual, almost breezy. "Dad, it's just a formality. It helps them get a better interest rate. You just sign as a reference, basically." Daniel's pen stopped moving. "Do you have copies of what you signed?" "No, Claire handled all of it." He exhaled slowly. "Richard, I need to request your full credit report and run a search on any financial instruments with your name on them. If you signed as a guarantor, you need to know before their creditors start calling." I signed the authorization forms without hesitation. Then I opened my laptop and showed him the video. He watched the full recording, his face unreadable. "Who recorded this?" "The videographer they hired. He contacted me." "Keep it," Daniel said. "Don't share it, don't post it. Just keep it. Combined with your financial records, it establishes a pattern that tells a very clear story. You did the right thing coming in," he said as I stood to leave. "And Richard, don't answer any calls from Derek or Gerald. If Claire reaches out, keep it brief and don't make any commitments." Daniel called Wednesday morning. "The money you sent, the transfers you identified as Derek's direct requests, They didn't go to a joint account. They went to a personal account registered to Gerald Whitmore. I sat forward in my chair. He sent my money to his father-in-law. Every dollar of it, and I can show you where it went from there. He opened a spreadsheet and pointed to 4 line items highlighted in red. Pool construction and installation, $28,000. Living room renovation, imported furniture, $31,000. Landscape redesign and driveway, $18,000. Down payment upgrade on the property, $12,000. He set the pen down and looked at me steadily. Richard, the home they used to host that party, the one where Derek said what he said to you, a significant portion of it was built with money that came from your account. I stood up and walked to the window, my hands pressed flat against the glass as I looked down at South Tryon Street. My chest felt like something had been wrung out of it. There's more, Daniel said. 3 active loan instruments with your name as guarantor. Total exposure, $340,000. The number landed like a physical blow. If Derek defaults, and given that your monthly support has stopped, the probability is increasing. The lenders can come after you. I signed the release forms right there. Daniel filed them that afternoon. Derek came to my house on a Friday afternoon. I watched him from the living room window, his silver Audi, his pressed shirt, his jaw tight. He stood on the front path, sent texts I didn't answer, waited, then drove away. I called Daniel. He'll try again, Daniel said. But you're clear. Your assets are protected. The next week, Claire called me, her voice thin and unsteady. Everything is falling apart, Dad. Gerald and Derek have been screaming at each other for 3 days. I've never heard Gerald raise his voice. Derek says Gerald knew about the loans. Gerald says he never agreed to anything, and they're both using me to get at each other. Where are you right now? In my car. In a parking lot. I couldn't stay in that house. My daughter alone in her car, hiding from her own life. Did you know? I asked. Before all this, did you know how much debt Derek was carrying? I knew things were tight, she said. He always said it was temporary. I believed him for years. The business loan? $680,000. I didn't know that account existed. I found out 4 days ago. Claire, I said, when Derek asked you to call me, the times he needed money, did you know why he did it that way? A long silence. Yes, she whispered. He said you responded better when it came from me, that you'd say yes faster. A sob broke through. I told myself it was just efficient. Oh God, Dad. I told myself it was just efficient. On a Thursday afternoon in August, Claire arrived at my house alone. She had found the blue notebook in my study, had read every entry. When I walked into the living room, she was holding it against her chest, like something she was afraid someone would take away. Her eyes were swollen, her face tracked with tears. I've been reading your handwriting for 45 minutes, she said, holding the notebook out to me. Read this one. I looked at the page. My own handwriting. Claire called. Sounds tired. Derek asked for another $800. Told her I'd handle it. She didn't ask twice. I don't think she knows I do this every time. I don't want her to have to ask twice. Claire broke down. You didn't want me to have to ask twice. You were worried about me having to ask twice. And I was calling you because Derek told me to. Because he said you'd say yes faster if it came from me. I put my arm around her. She turned into me like she did when she was small. Completely, without reservation. I love you, I said. That does not change. It has never changed. But things between us, the way things have worked, that has to change. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. I understand. 2 days later, Derek and Claire sat at my dining table, surrounded by 10 years of documents. Spreadsheets, bank statements, the video transcript. I walked them through every transfer. $48,000 for tuition, $35,000 for the apartment, $67,000 for medical bills, $89,000 in direct loans, $28,000 for the pool, $31,000 for the furniture, $18,000 for the landscaping, $12,000 for the down payment. Derek sat rigid, his face pale. Claire shook with silent tears. And then I played the video. Gerald raising his glass. Derek's laughter. The old man's predictable. And then the camera settled on Claire. She stood up, pressed both hands against the table. Derek, she said, just one word. 5 years of questions she hadn't known to ask. Then she turned to me, tears streaming. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I'm so sorry I let them. I walked around the table and put my arms around my daughter. I know, I said quietly. I know you didn't know. Derek walked out that afternoon. I never wrote another check. Claire filed for divorce in October. The settlement was modest. She walked away with her car, her savings, and not much else. But she walked away. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the east side. Martha and I helped carry boxes. When we finished, the 3 of us stood in her empty living room, and Claire looked at the bare walls and the afternoon light coming through the windows. It looks like a beginning, she said. It is, Martha said. The Whitmore Villa, built with my pool money, my furniture money, my landscaping money, was listed for sale. The creditors came for Derek. Gerald and Pamela's arguments grew loud enough that neighbors started avoiding the street, and my daughter started telling the truth. At Christmas, it was just the 3 of us. No performance, no pretense. Claire brought sweet potato pie. Martha made green bean casserole, and I carved a turkey too large for 3 people. Somewhere between the wine and whether scones were better warm or cold, Martha mentioned Alaska. I booked 2 tickets on December 27th, Anchorage, Denali, the Kenai Peninsula. On the plane to Alaska, somewhere over the Rockies, Martha fell asleep against my shoulder. I looked out the window at the clouds below us, white and endless, and I thought about everything that had happened in the past 6 months. I regret staying quiet too long. I gave money freely, but I never gave honesty freely enough. Not to Claire, not even to myself. I kept thinking love meant saying yes. It doesn't. Love means saying this is the truth, and I'm telling you because you deserve to hear it. If I could say one thing to anyone carrying a weight like mine, don't do what I did. Don't let years pass before you open that safe. Don't mistake silence for peace. Your dignity is not a gift you owe to people who stopped earning it. These are the stories I carry now, not with bitterness, but with clarity. This is one of many stories I will carry with me for the rest of my life. A family story that taught me more than any lesson I could have planned. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Your words mean more than you know. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, consider joining this channel so you never miss what comes next. Thank you truly for staying until the very end.